In Greek philosophy, there's a philosopher named Aristotle, Aristotle. He explains substance and category also, but in a different way, because Aristotle was a materialist. In fact, he's probably the first great Western materialistic philosopher. And he said that he tried to define substance as something material. And the categories are the material qualities of that material thing. So, therefore, most people, they think that philosophy begins with Aristotle. He was a disciple of Plato, who was a disciple of Socrates. Plato and Socrates were Mayavadi philosophers. But Aristotle became the first materialistic philosopher, famous one, and in the West. And he has misled people ever since that time in the West. Because all modern science and philosophy is based on a lot of the things that Aristotle wrote. So we see that if you make a mistake in the beginning, will you get the right answer in the end? Anybody, what do you think? No. If you make a mistake in the beginning, will you get the right answer in the end? No. So, all of Western science is based on many of the things Aristotle wrote 2,500 years ago. Do you think they'll ever get anything really right in the West? No. So, therefore, what we're doing is we're going way before Aristotle. We're going back to Krishna, who spoke the Bhagavad Gita 5,000 years ago. Aristotle was living 2,500 years ago. And Krishna spoke perfect knowledge and real substance. Like, what does this mean, substance? Like, when you look at something like, let's say, a new dhoti or a new sari. So you touch it, it feels like something, right? You can see it has length, it has width, it has texture, right? But 50 years from now, that sari might not be there anymore, right? It might just be a rag that's falling apart and you throw it away. So is it really a substance? Not really. It was just some temporary thing. So Aristotle was trying to define substance as something material. And then the next problem with that is the characteristics. Well, then they started talking about primary and secondary characteristics, like density, weight. He considers something as a primary characteristic, and then a secondary characteristic was color, smell. Well, color and smell, they change all the time. Density and weight seems to last a little longer, but even that changes too. So people are still not sure if there is any real substance in the material world. They end up with what's called relative truth. There's absolute truth and relative truth. Write that down. Absolute truth and relative truth. Absolute truth is something that's eternally true. It was always true in the past, it's true in the present, and it's true in the future. And relative truth means it depends on something else for its existence. Relative truth depends on something else for its existence. Now, because Aristotle defines substance as something material, everything else that he talks about is relative. Because the beginning point is something material. It's not absolute. It's not always going to be existing. So therefore, everything else is, from the beginning to the end, is relative. That leads to many types of conclusions about life. Most people think that life is temporary, and it's only relative to the body, which is temporary. And therefore, they think that the goal of life is, while you have this body, try and enjoy as much as you can. Because when you die, it's all finished. This is because of false philosophers like Aristotle. Whereas Krishna says that the soul is eternal. There was never any time that it did not exist. And he's the origin of all souls, so he's also eternal. Now, this is explained in the Bhagavad Gita. Therefore, Krishna is the real substance because his qualities never deteriorate. If anything, they increase, but they never deteriorate. Therefore, he's the real substance in life. Whereas everything else that exists is relative to Krishna. So that's the real meaning of relative. It's something is relative to something that's absolute. Relative means it's related to it. It depends on it. Now, Bhagavad Gita explains this very clearly. It says in the 8th chapter, verse number 20 and 21. Chapter 8, 20 and 21 will explain the difference between absolute and relative truth. And it says, Paras tasmat tubhavunyo vyakto vyaktak sanatana yasta sarve sabhutesu nasatsu na vinasyati avyakto shara ityuktas tam ahu paramam gatim yam prapya na vivartante tam ahu tad dhamma paramam mama. It says that there is an eternal nature called the spiritual world, which is transcendental to this manifested and non-manifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part, meaning the spiritual world, remains as it is. That supreme status, or the spiritual world, is called unmanifested and infallible, and is the highest destination. Going there, one never returns from there, which is Krishna's supreme abode. So here Krishna is saying that there's a spiritual world and there's a material world. The material world goes through two phases. Sometimes it's manifest, sometimes it's not manifest. It's called vyakta and avyakta. I'll explain this all and you'll be able to write it down. The spiritual world is always avyakta, manifest. But when people are in illusion in the material world, they don't see it. Therefore, it's called unmanifest. Although it's always manifest, but because we don't see it due to being blinded by Maya, for now it's called unmanifest. But when the material world goes from its manifest state to the unmanifest state, the spiritual world still is there because it's eternal. So, therefore, everything about Krishna is substance. It's real. It always exists. It's always existed in the past. It will exist in the present. It will exist in the future. It's never annihilated. It can never change or be diminished, but it always is increasing. That's why it's real substance. And the categories are everything about Krishna, and that includes Krishna's expansions, such as the jivas, you and me, such as the avatars, such as, meaning Lord Nrsingadev, etc., such as the spiritual world. All these things are the category of Krishna, the description of Krishna's qualities. Okay, so absolute truth is something that is eternal and cannot be in any way destroyed. On the other hand, it's always increasing. Why is it always increasing? Because it's living. While you're alive, your body grows, right? And it's increasing. Some people eat too much, their body keeps increasing, right? So, yes, because you're alive. So the spiritual world is eternal, so therefore it's always increasing. It's never decreasing. But matter, without the presence of the soul, decreases. Like when your soul leaves your body, does it increase anymore? No. It decreases. And eventually disappears. So, therefore, the spiritual world is always existing, and all the qualities are always existing and increasing. Therefore, it's absolute truth, because it's all coming from Krishna as the absolute truth. The material world goes through different phases, because actually matter without soul present, or without Paramatma present, without jivas present, is static. It doesn't move. It only starts moving when Krishna enters as Paramatma and the jivas enter. Then it starts moving. So now we can say, in a general sense, real substance is spiritual, or the soul. And everything else is category. Yes? The two verses I quoted, the 8th chapter, 20th and 21st verse. So that verse says that there's a spiritual world that right now is unmanifest because we're blinded by our attachment to Maya. But it's eternal, it's transcendental, and it is infallible. Write this word down. I-N-F-A-L-L-I-B-L-E. I-N-F-A-L-L-I-B-L-E. L-E. L-E. Infallible means it never makes a mistake. It's perfect. It can never be destroyed. It is always existing. So infallible means, and it's never can be obstructed and never can be stopped. Infallible means that it is perfect. So that's the spiritual world. But the material world is sometimes manifest and sometimes not manifest. Just like sometimes you have money in your pocket, sometimes you don't have money in your pocket. Sometimes you are young and sometimes you get old and die. Right? So that's the nature of the material world. And in the material world, everything that you see is not infallible. That means, everything you see is fallible. Fallible means it's not perfect. It can make mistakes. Okay, so you see that was a double negative. Not infallible means, so when you have a double negative, they cancel each other. So fallible is a word, and infallible is the opposite of it. Fallible means it's not perfect, it can make mistakes, it's not eternal, etc. Infallible means not fallible. It's perfect, it's transcendental, it makes no mistakes. Okay? But if I say not infallible, what does that mean? Yes? It means fallible. It's not perfect. Yeah. The two negatives cancel each other. Not and in will cancel each other, and it means fallible. It means it's the opposite of infallible. Okay. So the material world is fallible. Things fail. They're not perfect. They're not eternal, etc. So here Krishna is comparing the spiritual world to the material world. And he's saying that when the material world disappears, the spiritual world still continues. It never disappears. It never ends its existence. It doesn't, it cannot stop expanding. So, the material world goes through two stages. They're called Vyakta and Avyakta. Vyakta is V-Y-A-K-T-A. V-Y-A-K-T-A. Vyakta. Which means manifest, means you can see it. And then Avyakta, A-V-Y-A-K-T-A, means A-V-Y-A-K-T-A means it's not manifest. It disappears. So when material nature goes into the avyakta state, the energy is still existing, but nothing is happening because the time factor and the modes of material nature stop acting. So everything comes to absolute stillness. So now you see how confusing material nature is. Everybody's confused, and the people that are the most confused are the scientists. They're the most confused. They can't figure out how this is happening. And if you study modern science, where they talk about black holes and quarks and things like that, they come up with all these different theories, but none of those theories work. They can't really figure out material nature. In fact, it's easier to figure out spiritual nature than it is material nature. Yeah.
So why do we provide all of these equations? What is the point in doing that? Because they're trying to verify through the equations.
Now see, I'm going to tell you a secret now. The mathematical equations point to the existence of Krishna. But when they try and explain the nature of the material world, they keep Krishna out of it. Therefore, each one of their theories about the material world doesn't work, although the math is indicating the existence of Krishna. Now, how is that true? How is mathematics... just like, for example, Max Planck. He was a very famous German mathematician. He saw through math that there's something called an electromagnetic wave. It's invisible, but it travels through space. Then other scientists read his conclusion from math, and they said, well, then we should be able to find it, even though you can't see it. And then Jagdish Chandra Bose actually did an experiment and found electromagnetic waves. And he's actually the father of modern television, radio, and phone, and microwaves, and all these things. You know, he did an experiment in 1899 in the Royal Academy of Science in London, and he showed how he was on one side of the room, and on the other side of the room there was something like a piece of paper, and he set it on fire by shooting an electromagnetic wave at it. It's the first time that anyone ever actually saw it. And it blew their minds. They couldn't believe it. And that's the basis of radio waves, television, internet, everything. Right? So Max Planck, he was a brilliant mathematician. He theorized through math that there's some invisible things going on, and it's possible to find them, right? And then Marconi, Tesla, and Jagdish Chandra Bose, they actually were able to produce electromagnetic waves. You know, electromagnetic waves. See, even Benjamin Franklin knew that there's such a thing as static electricity, but they didn't know how to harness it and how to liberate it, like use it. You know, you see a lightning, and it's a huge amount of electricity going from a cloud to the earth. Didn't know how to harness it, but because of Max Planck and then Marconi, Tesla, Jagdish Chandra Bose, and others, they figured out how to harness electrical energy. Okay. Now, in mathematics, when you get into advanced mathematics, it points to the existence of God. And I'll tell you how. There are certain numbers in math. One is called pi. That's not what you eat. Right. What is pi? Does anyone know what pi is? Okay. Yes? What? Exactly right. It doesn't end, right? Now, there's another number, too. It's called the golden ratio. You don't probably have never heard of it. It's like pi. Yes. So there are numbers like this that exist that you have to use in order to be able to figure out mathematical problems. That you can't calculate the circumference of a circle without knowing pi, right? Now, those numbers that, say again what pi is, what kind of number it is. Yeah. You see? It's a decimal. So is the golden ratio. It's a decimal number. It just keeps going on forever, right? That's Krishna. It's pointing, see, that's mathematics. It's pointing to existence of God. And these numbers are amazing numbers. The golden ratio and pi are amazing numbers because without them you can't calculate so many things. The golden ratio is a number that was used to build the pyramids, to build Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, and to build other amazing architectural buildings. And not only that, for many other things. See, very few people know about the golden ratio, but it's been used since ancient times for construction. Like many of the temples, ancient temples in India, use the golden ratio for their construction. So these numbers are mystical numbers, and they're related to the creation of the world, and they're coming from the spiritual world, and they indicate the existence of Krishna. Nobody, see, whenever the scientists talk about, or the mathematicians, they talk about this, they know it indicates the existence of God. They purposely don't say it. Because if they say that, then they have to surrender to Krishna. Once you know Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, you have to surrender. Right? So they just talk about it, they use it, but they refuse to recognize where it's coming from and what it points to. So this is the difference between... Now, I'm going to test you right now. Have you, in your school, even in elementary school, did they talk about relativity or relative truths or things that are relative? Okay, Krishna 2. Krishna 1. What? Yes? What did they say about relative? You forgot. Okay. Sanskriti. What? You haven't learned. Okay. Okay, let's go a little higher. Middle school girls and boys. Have you ever heard about relativity or relative truth? Huh? Okay, let's go to the parents. You ever hear about relativity? Prabhu, have you ever, in your school? No! Come on. You never heard about absolute and relative? Okay, Davis, go ahead. You're in college.
At my school,
yes.
In anthropology, they say there is no absolute truth and there's only relative truth.
See? Exactly right. He's studying anthropology. Anthropology, by the way, is atheistic. 100% atheistic. It's based on the idea of Darwinism. It's based on Darwinism. Everything happened by accident and through permutations and mutations, and based on the principle of survival of the fittest, and all junk ideas. Archaeology is the most atheistic part of, let's call it, college knowledge. So, say what you just said.
They deny absolute truth altogether. There's no absolute truth and there's only relative.
Exactly right. And this started with Aristotle, right? There's only relative truth. There's no absolute truth. And that means that something relative means it depends on something else. It doesn't stand alone, right? But they say it's relative to other relative things. You understand? So now you end up with an unending chain of relative things, and there's no absolute. So what does that mean? It means there's no God. That's what it means. Is that right? Yeah. It means that there's no God. See, they've constructed it in such a way that they cut God out completely. However, the truth is, something is relative to something that's absolute. You can't be relative to something that's relative. You end up with a, what's called a, what's the name of that? It's an unending chain. It's an unending spiral. I'll think of it in a minute. Now, this is necessary for the atheist to defeat belief in God. They create, it's basically, they create a myth, and they insist that the myth is true, And you can't argue against them because they have completely eliminated God in everything that they write, in every theory that they make, and every breath of their existence. So anthropology is one example. Now, you didn't know I was going to ask you this question today, right? No. Okay, now repeat what you said about relative in anthropology.
So they deny the existence of absolute truth altogether, and they say that there's only relative truth.
Right. So, this making one thing exist based on another thing that's relative means you'll never find God in that type of environment. You'll never find God. And it's actually an illusion. There's no such thing. And the way the atheists argue is like this. They say, you say there's always a cause for an effect. Therefore, you say God created the world. But if there's always a cause for an effect, then who created God? This is their argument, right? Now, see, that is a false argument. It's set up to be false. And it's impossible to defeat it if you accept the first false premise. In other words, if you make a mistake in the beginning, will you get the right answer in the end? No. So therefore, they always begin with a mistake so that you can't get the right answer. What is the mistake? What did I start with? I said, for every effect, there should be a cause. Do you accept this? Yes, right? For every effect, there should be a cause. Actually, it's not true. Why is it not true? It's only relative to the material world. It's not relative to the spiritual world. Just like karma is an impermanent thing. It's only in the material world. It's not in the spiritual world. You see? So they begin with a relative statement. Therefore, they say everything is relative to that statement. Therefore, can you end up with something absolute? No, it's impossible. This is the way they cheat people. This is the way they defeat people who believe in God. They begin with a false assumption, and then you can't end up with the right conclusion in the end because you're starting on a false platform. And if you read the Bhagavatam, you'll see that cause and effect is only in the material world. It's not in the spiritual world. This is something that, I mean, most people assume there's always a cause and effect for everything. But it's only in the material world. And that's one of the major things that confuses people about spiritual life and about spiritual truth. They believe in cause and effect. Right? Now, I'll give you some examples. Now, why am I talking about this today? Because if you understand the falsity or the false basis of atheism, then you will never be fooled by the atheists. You'll never be fooled into believing there's no God. Now, why am I saying this? Because you're going to schools, just like Davis is going to a school, where the basis of all the courses they teach is relativism, that there's no absolute. And I'm saying Aristotle started this. There's a famous saying of Aristotle. He said, man is the measure. Have you ever heard that? No. Man is the measure. Look that up on the internet. See, his guru, Plato, and Plato's guru, Socrates, said that there is an absolute world. And that's the real measure. And man is not the ultimate measure of the truth. It's that absolute world that's the measure of the truth. Do you see that? What does it say? Is it attributed to Aristotle?
He is also believed to have taken a major controversy during ancient times through his statement that man is the measure of all things. Interpreted by Plato to mean that there is no absolute truth, but that which individuals mean to be the truth.
So they say Pythagoras?
Protagoras.
Oh, Protagoras, yeah. But actually, Aristotle picked it up also. Man is the measure, meaning that you judge everything according to man. You don't judge anything according to God. This is a famous statement. Man is the measure. So, but we say you judge everything according to Krishna. Right? If man is the measure, then everything's going to be relative. Because, why? Because every person, every man has 4 fundamental defects. What are they? Say one. Go ahead. Yamuna? They have imperfect senses. 1. Yes. Yes. 3. Yes. What? They're an illusion. Very good, Mayapur. Yes. 4. Yes. So, because of these 4 defects, how can man be the measure? Whatever he says, it's a good chance that it's an illusion, it's based on a mistake, and has a cheating propensity, and his senses are imperfect. So man cannot be the measure. So, what should the correct statement be?
God is the measure of all.
Yes. Because Krishna doesn't have defects like that. Okay, you see? So the whole Western philosophy, the whole Western science is based on man is the measure. Therefore, can they get things right? No. And the schools that you're going to, this is their theory, that man is the measure. Therefore, everything they're going to teach you is going to be imperfect. It's going to be fallible. What does fallible mean? Not perfect. Therefore, you'll never be able to arrive at the truth by learning that type of knowledge. And if you don't arrive at the truth, you'll never be happy, you'll never be peaceful, and you'll never attain love. You see? So you're being educated to fail. Would you agree? I mean, you're just graduating college now.
They don't teach you anything practical. They don't teach you how to cook. They don't teach you how to build a home. They don't teach you how to live a life that's nourishing.
They teach you to be dependent.
Yeah, dependent
On Safeway, on the Costco, on the, mortgages, companies, on...
We started very early because, I was at UW yesterday, and they do this at Central Washington too. Companies will come in when you're really young, and my dad was telling me when he was in college they did this too. Companies will come in, so when he was in college they would give out free shaving razors. And so I was at UW yesterday, and they were giving out like a bunch of juice of Odwalla.
Odwalla juice.
Yeah,
Oh, no,
it's like-
because times have changed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like a bunch of Odwalla juice, but then at Central Washington, on like the first couple of days, they like passed out like Red Bull energy drinks. And I was thinking about it, like, you know,
Why are they doing
these
that?
kids are young, they're 18.
Yeah.
And so they're getting these things, they're drinking them in college, and then when they get into the material world, when they drink those things, they're like, oh, back in my college days when things were easier. And they reminisce and they have that, you know, psychological
Right.
connection.
No, this is why. Now, I'm going to explain something. Okay, go ahead.
This is why they have Krishna lunch in Gainesville. So that the kids, they remember, oh my gosh, during my college years, I went to eating Krishna. So good. And later on, when they become professionals, they somehow connect back to the world.
Exactly.
Now, I'm going to explain something that's really diabolical. Do you know that they put meat extracts in baby food? Yeah. You know why? They want to train the baby to get the taste for meat so that they become a meat eater later on. Now, maybe not all baby food, but if you go back to the 1950s and 60s, they were definitely doing it. Now, it might be less, you know. But they want to train the babies to become meat eaters, to develop the taste for meat. You see? And in the same way, in the cigarette companies, we're putting highly addictive drugs in the tobacco so that people will get hooked on smoking. In the same way, the city of Sammamish and many cities in the United States put fluorine in the water. Fluorine is a very dangerous toxin. So, unless you control your food source, you will be exposed to subtle ingredients that can mold the way you think in the future. Right now, Google and Facebook are working on ways to control the thinking of people that use multimedia, websites. They are. If you read carefully the newspaper, you'll see they're talking about it. They want to eventually put a computer chip in the brain of every newborn baby.
They're starting with credit cards right now.
My credit card has a chip on it right here. That's a chip.
That's the start of it.
Yeah. And the chips are getting smaller and smaller, and they'll be able to insert one easily underneath the skin in the future, if they haven't already done it. And then they can control the way people think. Now, this is not some conspiracy theory, class where everyone should get all upset and scared. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to see that these conspiracies have been going on since the time of the ancient Greek philosophers. And even before that, the Mayavadis in Indian philosophy. They put ideas into the mind that are false. And everything that comes from it afterwards is going to be false. As soon as you accept one false idea, it corrupts every other idea you have. Is it? Okay, so in the Kali Yuga, there are 4 prominent things: meat eating, gambling, and speculation, intoxication, and illicit connections. Now, these 4 things are purposely meant to destroy the 4 universal principles of spirituality. That's what we're going to learn today. The 4 universal principles of spirituality. The 4 universal principles of spirituality. They are: 1, mercy; 2, cleanliness; 3, truthfulness; 4, austerity. Huh? The 4 universal principles of spirituality. The 4 universal principles of spirituality. 4 universal principles of spirituality. 1, mercy; 2, truthfulness; 3, cleanliness. Are you writing this down? 4, austerity. Now, the 4 prominent things in modern society are meant to destroy these 4 universal principles of spirituality. You see how modern life is constructed? So, they have the 4 things that destroy or deconstruct the 4 universal principles of spirituality are meat eating, intoxication, gambling and speculation, and illicit connections outside of marriage. Okay, now we're going to correlate them. This is science. Yeah. So, what does intoxication destroy? What does intoxication destroy? Which one of those 4 universal principles are destroyed by intoxication? What happens when someone gets intoxicated? Huh? What? Austerity. No. Yes. No. Yes, Yamuna. No. Huh? Mercy. Yes. Now, have you ever heard of an alcoholic father who's abusive to his children and his wife? Huh? It's a common thing. It's common in India now because there's so many alcoholics in India. They go drink and then they come home, they beat their wife and kids, and they spend all their money on drinking. There's no food for the family to eat, and so forth. Is this true? Is it happening in India? Yeah. Is it happening in the United States? Yes. You see. So, intoxication destroys mercy. Therefore, is it a good thing to get intoxicated? To drink beer and wine and coffee, tea, marijuana, huh? What's that? What did you just say? So, does it make sense that mercy is destroyed by intoxication? Okay, so we'll finish this right after opening of deities.
What were you talking about? It reminds me of Bhaktisiddhanta's quote at the beginning of Brahma Samhita, where he says the materialistic demeanor can never approach the transcendental autocrat.
Yes, yes. It's a nice phrase, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. Jai Shishi, Gornitai Ki Jai.
Gopiparana dhana madhana manohara Kaliya dhamana vidhana Kaliya Amala harina mamiya vilasa Amala harina mamiya vilasa Vipina purandhara navina nagara bhara Vamsi vadhana suvasa Brajajana palana surakulana shana Brajajana palana surakulana shana Nanda godhana rakovala Govindha Madhava Navanita Taskara Govindha Madhava Navanita Taskara Sundaranandha Gopala Jamuna Tattachara Gopi Pasanahara Rasarasika Kripa Moya Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natha Bhara Shri Radha Vallabha Vrindavana Natha Bhara Bhakati Vinodashaya Yashomati Nandhana Brajabara Nagara Yashomati Nandhana Gokula Ranjana Kana Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astotaras Shishiman, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astotaras Shishiman, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki. Mayapur Dham Ki. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki. Ganga Mai Ki, Jamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Maharani Ki, Samaveta Bhaktavinda Ki. All glories to the Sammo devotees. All glories to the Sammo devotees. All glories to the Sammo devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. So we're just going to go back to one point and then finish up the four universal principles of spirituality. So the point we're going to go back to is what's called an infinite regress. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-E. Infinite. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-E. Infinite. I-N-F-I-N-I-T-E. Regress. R-E-G-R-E-S-S. Infinite regress. What is an infinite regress? It's based on the idea of cause and effect. For every effect, there must be a cause. So if you say that God created the world, then the atheist will say, but who created God? Because every effect has a cause. So then you say, well, X created God. Then who created X? Y created X. Then who created Y? Z created Y. So that's called an infinite regress. Now, in simple terms, who came first, the chicken or the egg? What's the answer? Huh? But you can't have an egg without a chicken. So it must be the chicken. But you can't have a chicken without an egg. So it must be the egg. But you can't have an egg without a chicken. So it must be a chicken. You see? So that's another example of an infinite regress. Now, this infinite regress is interesting. We're going to hear about it now by the example of the chicken and the egg. The philosophers have been discussing this since the time of Aristotle. And it says here, ancient philosophers were not aware of biological evolution. Aristotle was reportedly puzzled by the idea that there could be a first bird or a first egg, and concluded that both the bird and the egg must have always existed. This is a Buddhist conception. Buddhist conception is you don't have to worry about is there a God or not a God. Why? Because the material world has always existed. So there's no question of worrying about is there God or not God. So Aristotle came to the same conclusion. Which came first, the bird, the chicken or the egg? His conclusion was, it's not a question to even think about, because the chicken and egg have always existed. But how can they always exist if the material world goes through two phases, avyakta and vyakta, manifestation and unmanifestation? So you see, even great philosophers like Aristotle are confused by the chicken or the egg infinite regress. And there are many infinite regresses, because if you understand 8th chapter verses 20 and 21, then you'll never be confused. What does the 8th chapter verses 20 and 21 say? Who can explain? Parastasmat tu bhavo nyo vyakto vyaktat sanatana. It says that when the material world is annihilated, the spiritual world remains as it is. So, what does that mean? How does that relate to the chicken and the egg? Anybody? Come on. Yes, Amina. What? Well, you can't have an egg without a chicken. Yes, but the chickens are always there too. Okay, you remember what we learned? That the material world is the dictionary of the spiritual world. Who remembers that? Arush. Do you remember that when we discussed it? The material world is the dictionary of the spiritual world. What does that mean? Yes. The material world is a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. Okay? So, what does that mean? That means a perverted reflection means it's an upside down reflection. Whatever you see in the material world, if you turn it around, it's in the spiritual world. But in the spiritual world, it's eternal, and in the material world, it's temporary. So if you see a rabbit in the material world, is there a rabbit in the spiritual world? Yeah. If you see a cow in the material world, is there a cow in the spiritual world? Yes. Right? So if you look, that's why it says the material world is the dictionary of the spiritual world. What does a dictionary do? It has a bunch of words in it, and it defines what the words are, right? But what we're seeing here is a perverted reflection. So the cow we see here, there's a cow in the spiritual world, but it's not exactly like the cow in the material world. What is the difference between the Surabhi cows in the spiritual world and the cows that we see in this world? Yes?
The Surabhi cows give milk without having a baby or anything. Like, unlimited milk is there, they have to have...
Okay, the key word is unlimited. They don't only give milk. They can give anything. They can give anything. They're not limited to milk. Did you know that? And now you know it. They can give anything. Just like the kalpa-vriksha tree. What's the difference between the kalpa-vriksha tree in the spiritual world and one of these trees that are out there? Yes. 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 What can that tree give you? No, it can give you something. Yes? Even when you're talking about the kalpavriksha tree. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you don't have to peel the mango. It's already peeled. It's pretty good. And they're really good mangoes. They're not, half ripe. They're fully ripe. Okay, so that's why it says the material world is a perverted reflection. Although everything you see in the material world exists in the spiritual world, except for demons. The demons are only in the spiritual world in name only, but not in person. But the material world things that you see are perverted reflections. They're not exactly the same, because there's a major difference between a kalpavriksha tree and a pine tree. Yes.
Like demons, like right now you would be like, oh, Hitler, right? He's a demon. But like after his next life and all his life, you may be able to get liberated and go back home, like back to
Yes. Why? Why is that possible? No, it's because of Krishna's mercy, right? When Vibhishan, who was a Rakshasa, went to Lord Ram and bowed down to him, did Ram say, no, I don't accept Rakshasas as disciples? No, he accepted him. So, because he's merciful. Now, do you know anybody that's merciful like that? I don't. I mean, maybe Prabhupada, that's it, but nobody else. Nobody's merciful in the material world. What is mercy destroyed by? Intoxication. So, if you drink a Gatorade, or you drink a power drink, or you drink coffee, can you be merciful? Not really, because you're being intoxicated. If you think you're very, very rich and you're really attached to your money, can you be merciful? Not really, because you're intoxicated by that. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so my question was like you said demons, how, like what do you mean, like there's no demons in the spiritual world? Like, when there's demons here, aren't they, like over thousands of years,
No, in the spiritual world, they only hear about the demons, but there are no demons there. Here, you hear about them, and they are there. That's all. Okay, so coming back to the infinite regress, or the example of the chicken and the egg, this has confused people. And they always end up saying that, like for example, I read what the modern evolutionists, the Darwin followers, say. If they say, if the question refers to eggs in general, the egg came first, as the first egg-laying animals evolved millions of years prior to birds. If the question refers to chicken eggs, specifically, the answer is, again, the egg, but the explanation is more complicated. An animal nearly identical to the modern chicken, that is, the proto-chicken, laid a fertilized egg that had DNA identical to the modern chicken. Due to the mutations in the mother's ovum, the father's sperm, or the fertilized zygote. Put more simply, by Neil deGrasse Tyson, which came first, the chicken or the egg? The egg laid by a bird that was not a chicken. This is like ridiculous explanation. You understand? It has no scientific value at all. It's just a bunch of gobbledygook, because they can't answer the question. Yes.
how did the other chicken lay that?
That's the whole point. It wasn't a chicken. It was a proto-chicken. It was.
So how did that proto-chicken lay that egg?
And then, how did the proto-chicken come into existence? There was a proto-proto. chicken. And how did the proto chicken come into it? There was a proto chicken. It's called infinite regress, you see. So it's all nonsense. It's all complete nonsense. No, that's based, or as they say in English, it's predicated upon the idea. This is a very nice way of speaking. Predicated upon. Look that up. Predicated, P-R-E-D-I-C-A-T-E-D. If you learn this word, it's like $1 million word. Predicated upon the idea that there's no absolute truth. There's only relative truth. P-R-E-D-I-C-A-T-E-D and then U-P-O-N. It's a very classy way of saying based on. Do you see the word? No, look up the phrase. Don't try and look it up in the dictionary. Look up the phrase. Predicated upon. If you're in class and your teacher asks you a question and say, who came first, the chicken or the egg? You raise your hand. It's predicated on the idea that there's an infinite regress. Teacher will look at you and go, how did you learn that? Where did you learn that from? Who taught you that? all the other kids will look at you. Krishna too is a genius. Yes, what does it say?
Be predicated upon something. Formal if an action or event is predicated on a belief or situation, it is based on it or depends on it.
That's it, based on. Let's just remember that. Don't read that. The rest of it is just a lot of words. Predicated upon means based on. Right? But it's a very nice way of saying it. If you use that phrase, everyone will look at you and say, wow, I wish I could speak like that. Okay? So, how do we explain the enigma? That's another nice word, enigma, of the chicken and the egg. How do we explain it? Who can explain it? What's the answer? Obviously the scientists, the philosophers, they don't have an answer. Yes. What? Whenever you say the name Krishna, you have to say that really loud. Yeah, but if you just say everything comes from Krishna, then they'll say, well, everything comes from nature. So you'll never get anywhere like that. No, you have to explain the difference between absolute and relative. That the spiritual world is absolute truth, and the entire material world is relative truth, and that the material world is the dictionary of the spiritual world. In other words, everything you see in the material world exists in the spiritual world, but not in a perverted form as in the material world. So there is an ideal chicken in the spiritual world. And it's eternal. And it's growing all the time. And it's active. And it's all in relationship to love for Krishna. Now, are there eggs in the spiritual world? This is another question.
No, because that chicken is eternal.
Exactly right. If the chicken wants in the spiritual world, they can lay an egg. Just like people don't have to eat in the spiritual world. But if they want to eat, because Krishna is offering them prasadam, then they eat. And there's no need for reproduction in the spiritual world because everyone's eternal. So are there children in the spiritual world? Yeah. So where did they come from? Because there's no reproduction. Huh? Yeah, there's like, for example, Krishna exists in 3 different ages in Goloka Vrindavan, in the spiritual world. You know, anything about that subject? Anyone want to say anything about it? So in Goloka Vrindavan, this is above Vaikuntha. This is above Vaikuntha. There are three places. There's Vrindavan, there's Mathura, and there's Dwarka. So Krishna in Vrindavan is appearing as a baby up to the age of around 5, 6. And Krishna in Mathura is like 6 to like 13. And Krishna in Dwarka is like 16 to 21. You see? So, are there children, like you saw the film, Baby Krishna. Okay, Krishna 1, can you stop playing with your eraser? Stop fidgeting. Stop not paying attention. And start paying attention, right? If you want to fidget, we have a room, one of those rooms. We'll put you in the room and close it, and you can fidget all you want. But you're not allowed to do that in the class. Do you understand? Next time you start, we're going to ask you to be exiled to that closed room. You will be the first exile. You're first ostracized. And that doesn't mean ostrich. Okay, so, and Krishna too, you're going to go with him too if you don't pay attention. You'll be the second ostracized person. You know what ostracized means? It's not an ostrich. Okay, who knows what ostracized means? Yes?
Like they kicked out, like moved out.
Yes. Removed. Okay, so how do we answer the question, who came first, the chicken or the egg? Wrong. You can't have an egg without a chicken. No, in the spiritual world you can have a chicken without an egg. So you got that wrong. You're not listening. This is the problem. You're sitting in the class, you're not listening. What's the purpose of the class? To listen. So if you don't learn to listen in the class, where are you going to learn to listen? Do you listen in your class at school? Huh? What? Yeah? Then how come you don't listen in class in the temple? Is the temple a permanent playground? Is that why? So you should listen better in the temple than in the class. And I bet you don't listen all the time in the class either. Is that true? Okay, so it is true. Okay, so yes.
So like here, like the deities, the deities and the temple, like we're doing something spiritual for Krishna. So are the deities eternal? But nothing in the material world is eternal. How is that like?
No, the service you're rendering, the effect of it is eternal. And Krishna is appearing so that you can offer him service. So the service you're rendering, the result of that service is eternal. How do we know that? 2nd chapter, 40th verse. What does it say? 2nd chapter, 40th verse. What does it say? Neha bikramo nastosti pratijayo na vidyate swalpam apiyasya dharmasya chayate mahato bayat. Okay, so what does this verse say? What is it referring to, this endeavor? Devotional service. Okay, in this, go ahead, read.
In this endeavor, there is no loss of illumination and a little advancement on this path.
Okay, Krishna 1, you're going to be ostracized. Okay, sit over here. Okay, read it again. It's over here, in the corner here. Over here. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Right up to the corner. Keep going. Keep going. Faster, faster, faster. Okay. Yeah.
In this endeavor, there is no loss or diminution, and a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear.
Okay, so what does this verse mean? 2nd chapter, 40th verse. It means that you can never be a loser in Krishna consciousness. Can you be a loser in material life? Yeah. Do you want to be a loser? Then what should the conclusion be? What? What's the conclusion? All the time. Then you'll never be a loser. And don't be Krishna conscious, then you will be a loser. The one thing you don't want to be, you will be by avoiding. You understand Krishna 1? By avoiding being Krishna conscious, you will be a loser. You want to be a loser? So then why don't you pay attention in the class? Huh? Yeah, but not enough. You're a very intelligent boy. If you paid attention, I don't know what, you'd be the next Einstein. Right? More than Einstein. The next pure devotee, yes. Okay, why is that? There's a reason why. Why? Can you answer? Yeah, you're committing offenses. If you chant with offenses, then the result of the chanting is held back.
So chanting, is it devotional service?
It is or isn't?
Is it?
Of course it is. It's the number one service. No, but wait a minute. You said chanting. What if you chant, marijuana, 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 marijuana? Is that chanting? No, that is chanting. But it's not chanting Hare Krishna. And, well, so, if you say chanting, what do you mean by chanting? Some rounds, like what? Like some rounds of marijuana? Yes. So if you chant, you'll get the result. But if you commit offenses while chanting, the result is held back. It's there, but you can't touch it. It's like having money in a 10-year what do you call it? IRA, a 10-year type of investment in a bank. So you're getting higher percentage rate, but you can't touch it for 10 years, right? So if you commit offenses, the result of chanting Hare Krishna is kept in abeyance. Write this word down. ABEYANCE. This is another high-class word. ABEYANCE. ABEYANCE. What does abeyance mean? Okay, who's looking it up? Who's looking up the word abeyance? Yes. What does it mean? These are all very high-class words. If you learn these words and use them, people will say, "Wow, where did you learn that?" Yes, temporary suspension. So if you commit offenses, the result of chanting Hare Krishna is suspended. What happens when something is suspended? Let's say you're in school and the principal calls you in his office and says, Krishna 1, you are suspended. What does that mean? Yeah, you're not allowed to come to the school. So to keep in abeyance means that you have something but you can't touch it. It's suspended for a period of time. So if you commit offenses while chanting Hare Krishna, the benefit of chanting Hare Krishna is suspended. It's not destroyed, but it's suspended. You can't get it until you stop committing offenses. Okay, so we're going to go back to the 4 universal principles of religion: mercy, cleanliness, truthfulness, austerity. So now we know that intoxication destroys mercy. Number 2, what destroys truthfulness? Okay, yes, Vishaka, you wanted to say something? No, you didn't want to say something. Okay. So, okay, Sanskriti. And there's 2 parts to it. No. Yeah. No. Gambling is the correct answer, but there's gambling and something else. Huh? What? No, that's what we're talking about. What destroys truthfulness? Yeah, but what's the type of cheating? Okay, philosophical speculation and gambling destroys truthfulness. Both of them, what? Did you write it down? Did you write down the 4 universal principles of religion or spirituality? Mercy and cleanliness, truthfulness, and austerity, right? So mercy is destroyed by intoxication, taking drugs, whatever. And now we learn that truthfulness is destroyed by gambling and philosophical speculation. Okay? And now number 3, what destroys cleanliness? Illicit connections outside of marriage destroys cleanliness. Right. And, what? Illicit connections outside of marriage. And number 4, what destroys austerity? Yeah, meat eating and intoxication, both. And meat eating also destroys mercy. Both of those things together destroy mercy and austerity. Mercy is destroyed by intoxication and meat eating. And truthfulness is destroyed by gambling and philosophical speculation. So we gave an example of how philosophical speculation destroys truthfulness earlier today. Does anyone remember the example? Yes. Yeah.
Man is the measure of things.
Yes.
Rather than God is
That's all destroys truthfulness. And then number 3, cleanliness is destroyed by illicit connections. And number 4, austerity is destroyed by meat eating and intoxication. Okay. So, when you see somebody engaged in meat eating, what do you know? Jai Shri Radha Nilmadhava Ki Jai.
They're ignorant.
And besides that, yes, they're in ignorance, yeah, but besides that, what else do you know?
They're not as pure.
No. Yeah. No, you can't expect mercy from them. You cannot expect mercy. Who can you expect mercy from? Or, yeah, a devotee who follows the regulative principles. Can you receive mercy from a devotee who doesn't follow the regulative principles? No. Well, if they don't follow regulative principles, they're not even a devotee, right? Okay, so we'll stop right there. And we have English class, whoever wants to come, at 10 o'clock.
How do we explain the enigma game of acting, the dictionary, material world with the dictionary of spiritual world and spiritual world can exist, Krishna is Palo, 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 and then
See, in the absolute world, everything's eternal, right? So if the material world is a dictionary of the spiritual world, then there must be a chicken also in the spiritual world, but it's an eternal chicken. There's a perverted reflection of it in the material world. Yeah. Haribo. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Try and remember everything we discussed today.
कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन प्रभु प्रेमामृतम बनिधि धीर धीर जन प्रिय प्रिय करो पूजित श्री चैतन्य कृपा भरौ भुवि भुव भारा तारक वंदे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्री जीव गोपालक वंदे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्री जीव गोपालक कृष्ण कीर्तन गान कृष्ण कीर्तन गान नर्तन परम प्रेम में कामनी वीर वीर जन प्रिय प्रिय करो निर्मा पूजितम श्री चैतन्य कृपा भरौ तन्न कृपा भरौ भुवि भुव मारव अंतरक वंदे रूप सनातन रघुजुगौ श्री जीव विचारणै कल्पना सद्धर्म संस्थापक लोकानां हितकारिणं त्रिभुवने मन्नं शरण करो विचारणैकनुकुला सद्धर्म संस्थापक लोकानां हितकारिणं त्रिभुवने मन्नं शरण kanipuna Tadharma Samastapaka Lokanang Hitakarina Tribhuvane Mannang Saranla Sri Chaitanya Kripa Barav Lokanang Hitakarinang Tribhumane Mannang Sarana Karam Vicharanaikanipnam Tadharma Samastapakam Lokanam Hitakarinam Tribhuvane Mannam Saranakaram Radha Krishna Radha Krishna Padaravindav Bhajanamritav Radha Krishna Padaravindav Madana Nandena Mattalika Vande Rupa Sanatanam Raghujugal Siji